This is going to be the first episode of a series for how to stay safe in DeFi. And the first topic we're going to be covering are MEV attacks. Now, you might be familiar with this concept already, but in this video, we're going to break down what actually lets it work. So to start off with, we have regular DeFi DEX swaps. And these are the things that actually allow MEV attacks to take place. And we're first going to look at how they actually function and then where the MEV attack, what's its entry point, where the bot capitalizes from the attack. So with swaps in DeFi, the basic way they work is you submit a swap, it gets submitted to a mempool, which essentially holds information on this transaction before it's actually included in a block and actually goes live on the blockchain. Now, the thing to keep in mind is that in this mempool, the information for this swap is visible publicly. And just keep that in mind as we move on to the MEV attacks. So it gets included in a block and it's then executed on a DEX and the swap happens. Now, there are two main metrics or factors that impact the price you get when you perform a swap. And these are called TSI, which stands for trade size impact, and slippage. Now, if you're not familiar with how they work, we're just going to quickly go over them. We have an entire video dedicated to decentralized exchanges and how they work. So we're going to go into all of these in more detail. This is just a super simple overview. So think of it this way. When you perform a swap, you're interacting with a liquidity pool that has two assets. So for example, if we want to buy ETH for USDC, we're going to interact with the pool that has USDC and ETH. And of course, the more USDC and the less ETH is in this pool, the pricier ETH is going to be because the pool needs to make sure that it has a balance of these assets. So think of it this way. We perform a swap and then say we want to buy some ETH. We're going to add more USDC into this pool. We're going to take ETH out. And then this has essentially an impact on the proportion of assets within this pool, which is the trade size impact. Now, where slippage comes into play is that this move, this rebalancing of assets within the pool, is going to also affect the price of ETH when our swap executes. And so we need to also factor in, are we okay with the price moving that much? And the way you communicate that you're okay with a certain price mismatch is through slippage. And typically it's going to be about, depending on the asset, it might be 0.05%, it might be 0.2%. It really depends on the assets and how much your swap size is also going to impact the liquidity pool. But that's two factors to keep in mind. Trade size impact is how much our swap is going to affect the balance of the pool before it executes. Slippage is the tolerance we have for the price mismatch we might get when the swap actually executes. So in reality, we can set a slippage limit of say 0.5%, but in reality, when the swap executes, there's only going to be maybe a 0.05% mismatch. So it's possible that we get a much better price than our slippage settings originally communicated. So just keep that in mind. So again, to reiterate, the trade is visible before it actually executes. Now let's move to MEV attacks. The most common form of a MEV attack are sandwich attacks. And as you can see here, I tried to illustrate it into a sandwich while it still looks presentable on the whiteboard. So how does it look like? So here we have your swap. This swap where you maybe say, I want to buy ETH from this liquidity pool, and this swap is included in the mempool. A bot can see what you're going to do here. They're going to see the amount of ETH you're going to buy, and they're then going to use math to calculate the impact that your trade size is going to have on this pool. So what it does is, you want to buy ETH. It's going to front run you. That means it's actually going to compete to actually have its own swap submitted before yours goes through, and it's going to buy ETH before you do. It's then going to push the price of ETH up, which means it buys it at one price, you get ETH at a worse price, and then once you buy the ETH, the price of ETH goes up, the bot then back runs and it sells off the ETH it just bought. So it buys it at one price, you perform your swap, the price of ETH goes up, and then it sells off ETH, and then it drops back down again. So that's how these attacks actually profit. And why is it bad for the user? Well, because you get the worst possible price for your swap. Because if we look back to the slippage settings, as I said, maybe on this swap with this trade size impact, the realistic slippage that might occur is 0.1%. But if you put slippage of 0.5%, for example, here, okay, your slippage is 0.2%. Realistically, it's going to execute at 0.05%, but the bot can see that there's, let's say, room to maneuver here between the realistic slippage based on the trade size impact and the one you input. And so it's going to front run you, and it's going to try and push the price to max slippage. Now, it has to be careful because if the bot pushes the price above your slippage range, the transaction is going to fail, and the bot is also going to fail in its plan and waste gas. So it's going to try and push this price up as much as possible. It's going to calculate the trade size impact that it can reach, where your swap can then get executed at the worst possible price, and it can then sell off the asset it bought when its price went up. So the thing to keep in mind is this isn't any kind of hack. It's not an exploit. It's not stealing money from your wallet. This is just you getting the worst possible price and the bot profiting off of that fact. But if the trade is outside of your slippage range, it's not going to execute. So that's to reiterate how that worst possible price works. And now we also move on to MEV protection. How does one actually stay safe from these sandwich attacks that are the most common with MEV attacks? So the first is a private RPC. And the way this works is that when you submit a transaction using a private RPC, it's not actually included in the mempool visible to everybody. So it's private, meaning that MEV bots are not actually able to view it in the mempool, so they can't really front run it since they can't figure out what your swap is actually going to be, and they can't figure out what the trade size impact is going to be. And one of the more popular ones are Flashbot RPCs, but also Rabbi, MetaMask wallets tend to have their own private RPCs. You just go to your RPC settings and you either select the one that's included in your wallet, or you get the URL from the Flashbot's website, you include that, you paste it into the RPC section, you save it, and then it's going to use these private RPCs to submit your transaction. Now, another defense mechanism is a solver or intent-based system. So how this works is that actually you don't submit a transaction to a mempool, you submit an intent. You essentially just tell this solver, I want to execute this swap. I want to sell this much USDC and buy this much ETH, for example. And so the solvers then see your intent and then they compete to actually execute this swap, and you end up getting the best possible execution, because sometimes these solvers might even do sort of peer-to-peer matching where they find somebody who wants to sell their ETH and they find you who wants to buy ETH, and so they match you where you might not even have to interact with a liquidity pool at all. So this is another way where you're not even submitting it to a mempool ultimately. And one of the more popular options is Cow Swap. Cow actually stands for coincidence of wants, which goes back to what we said, where there's a coincidence where you might want to buy ETH, somebody wants to sell ETH, and you get matched. So it's this matching system. A third option that you can stay safe is if you're using DeFi Saver. It has what's known as TX Saver, which is kind of the middle grounds here. It does keep your transaction safe from MEV attacks by using a custom private RPC, but it also uses a DEX aggregator internally, where it has 6 different DEX aggregators and it finds you the best possible swap route. So it's not exactly this matching system that the solver system implements, but it's not also just a private RPC. It's kind of the middle grounds that keeps you safe. And you can access it if you perform a transaction or a suitable transaction through the DeFi Saver interface. And Without going into too much more technical detail, this was a quick introduction into what MEV attacks are, what actually lets them happen, what's the infrastructure that they try and capitalize off of, and some of the actionable steps that you can take. As a follow-up, I could recommend looking at our video on DEXs or decentralized exchanges in DeFi. Those are going to help you understand better these slippage and TSI metrics, and also DEX aggregation and a lot of the factors and concepts we talked about here, which is, I think, going to help you have a full picture of how MEV attacks actually work and how to protect yourself against them.